So welcome to the December 8th Student Advisory Council. My name is Toni Constatman. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Kentucky Department of Education, and I'm very excited to see you all today. So the first thing I'd like to do is just check in with all of you all. I'm not sure if Dr. Glass has joined us yet. I know he had a previous meeting. So I just wanted to check in. Is Soyana here today? I wasn't able to see if she checked in yet. If not, I will go ahead and share my screen so we can see what the agenda looks like. Hold on one second. And we will go to our next, we'll just skip over Dr. Glass for the moment, and we will go to our next item on the agenda, which I believe is Dr. Sweeney. Is Dr. Sweeney available?
Hey, Toni.
Let's just go ahead and go to you.
Wonderful. And Toni, if you don't mind, I'm gonna share my screen just because I need to toggle between a couple of things.
Perfect. And then we'll go back to Dr. Glass, and he'll talk to you a little bit about. We have a couple of updates for you all. Obviously, there's been a lot of things going on with the meeting that we had with our superintendents and the governor on potential vaccines, and so just a lot going on at the department. And I'm sure that Dr. Glass will give you an update on that. So without further ado, I'll let Dr. Sweeney take over.
All right, awesome. So you should see my screen. You should also, I just put a Padlet activity, a Padlet link in the chat box. So if you can go to the Padlet real quick. And by the way, based on what Regina said, I'm Damian Sweeney. I'm the KDE Program Coordinator for Comprehensive School Counseling. Students, it's nice to be with you again. So we're going to just do a quick mental health check-in. So if you go to that Padlet, you should see this. All right, and remember, this activity is for our students, also our adults. So let's start with, what is the first appropriate song that comes to mind that describes the way you feel today? Put that in your Padlet, please. And if I need to change, oh, okay, looks like we're good. Ooh, that's a good one. If you wouldn't mind also putting the artist in, I'm sure some of us would like to follow up and listen later, especially if they're songs that might improve moods. Oh, G-Eazy. Like it. We've also got this this educator at the Kentucky Department of Education. His name is Bill Buchanan, and what I love about Bill is before every meeting, we call them learning opportunities, but before every learning opportunity, he starts with this kind of moment of gratefulness, which again just really helps set the tone of meetings, set the mood of meetings. So really want to give a shout out to Bill Buchanan, but I also want to know, what is one way someone from school, could be a principal, a teacher, a counselor, a student, friend, coach, etc. How has somebody from school helped you during this time, during the pandemic?
And Dr. Sweeney, this is Toni. I just think that it looks like Michaela has joined us from KSB.
Hey.
Is that correct? Can you hear me?
Michaela can't hear you, but the interpreter's here and can verify that Michaela and Elizabeth are both here. Yes.
Okay.
Before going to the third and fourth column, we're gonna talk more about the third and fourth column. So you can start on that, but we're gonna talk a little bit more about that before we go to that next step. Go ahead, Toni. Sorry.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure that if they wanted to participate, to let us know, and the interpreters can just chime in, and then we would love to hear from both of them as well.
Hi, this is one of the other interpreters. Sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to message Regina privately, as I cannot see anybody. All I can see is the screen share, and I'm in as yes. I don't know if that has something to do with it.
I don't see Michaela's video turned on. And I am trying to find Elizabeth here. I don't see Elizabeth's video on either.
Michaela is here and she says that she sees both of us, but I can't see anybody. But
I can't see her or Elizabeth's video at all.
So are you wanting them to turn on their video? Is that what you're saying?
They'll need to turn on their video so that they can communicate back with the interpreters, yes.
Right, okay.
Sorry, Damien.
It's okay. I'm just glad that we're making sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate. All right. So again, it's really, really important for us to kind of check in with ourselves, to have that moment of gratefulness. It's also helpful for us at KDE to see what's working really well for you at school and what might be uplifting for you and your mental health as well. So that's what that column number 2 is for. Again, before we get to column 3 and 4, I'm going to talk to you about a few things and then have you kind of finish up with those. But I see that some of you are already digging in, so that's perfectly fine. Now, would anybody like to talk a little bit about that first song that came to mind that describes the way you're feeling and how that song is connecting to you this morning? Would anybody like to come off to use their mic and then tell us a little bit about that?
Go ahead and raise your hand. I know you guys are talkative. Who wants to raise their hand first?
So as I go through the list, like I'm seeing
It's like
songs.
Jack.
Okay.
Jack.
Yeah, hi, this is Jack speaking. I actually heard this song on a playlist it was Home Buddy. I don't even know who the author or who the artist is. I had to look it up. But I haven't been able to get out a lot because I can't drive yet. So I'm stuck at home for the most part and getting as much driving practice as possible because I have my test soon. But I haven't been able to do a lot. So I'm just kind of being a home buddy and just staying home and getting stuff done.
Very good. Very good. All right. Anybody else? So many of these songs I've connected with in my life, and actually some of them I've actually used in small counseling groups with students before, like "The Pursuit of Happiness" by Kid Cudi, for example. What else? Who else wants to speak? All right, that's fine. We'll move on to the next one. 21 Pilots we've also used in some of our small counseling groups. They are fantastic. All right, so today I want to talk to you a little bit about resilience. Last time we chatted, we spoke about coping. So I'm finding that more and more folks are really, we're just struggling. We're struggling in our schools. We're struggling in our world, in our society, et cetera. So resilience is really something that we need to focus on, and we need to remember that we have this within us. All right, so becoming resilient starts with the realization that the adversity you experience, any pain, discrimination, or challenge can be converted into powerful fuel that can actually bring opportunity. And that's kind of hard to think about. So when we're going through tough times, it's really hard to think about like, gosh, I'm going to be able to use this tough time later in life. But in reality, many of us do use that in order to become resilient and in order to improve our lives or our situation. So again, it's tough to think about, but pain can actually equal opportunity. And I'm not going to read a bunch to you this morning, but I do think this one is important. So negative emotions are equally powerful, and potential fuel exists from the feelings that accompany depression, anxiety, disappointment, anger, being disrespected, and other painful emotions. When you have resilience breakthrough, you realize that the fuel is there. You know how to access the fuel, and you can use it. You can access it quickly. So I'm going to just show you just a few kind of sources of resilience that you may utilize in your own life. All right, so flipping the switch is one. So this is when you do have this power to see your challenges differently and convert your anger or your frustration into the fuel, to be better. All right. And I've been listening to a lot of different thinkers, just different people that speak about mental health. And one of my go-tos is this guy named Tony Robbins, and he recently had this podcast, and he talked a lot about if you become a blessing for somebody else, then you'll start receiving more blessings. And he talks about the meaning of living is giving. And he also spoke about your power to choose how you feel will determine your quality of life. So let's read that one more time. So your power to choose how you feel will determine your quality of life. So if you choose to feel happy, what quality of life are you going to is that going to produce? Or if you choose to feel comfortable in your own skin and not doubt yourself, right? That's going to produce a really good quality of life for you. But what if you choose to feel kind of sad, lonely, uncomfortable? Those things are going to be harder for you to. You're going to struggle with some of that throughout your life if that's the choice that you make. Obviously, some of us don't really have certain choices with that because of a potential mental health diagnosis. All right, so we also need to think about how we're connecting with others. And it does take vulnerability to open the door to resilience. And true connection requires honesty and vulnerability. So today, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to have to open up with one another so that we can kind of open the door to resilience. Forgive me, I've got a 5-year-old that's quarantined with me this morning. All right, so I've been using this curriculum and talking a lot with these folks from us that they work on social emotional learning and then resilience. And I've been reading this book called The Resilience Breakthrough. And one of the things the author states is he talks about this other form of resilience called relational resilience. And so when you have relational resilience, your greatest motivation to make good decisions and put more effort into life and not give up is the knowledge that others depend on you. And one thing that we know about some of you is that some of you have younger brothers or sisters, you've got nieces and nephews, you've got other folks that might rely on you. And that might be one source of resilience for you, is that kind of relational resilience. All right, the next kind. Actually, if you wouldn't mind, if I can get a volunteer to read the next slide. All right, so can somebody read the slide for me?
Looks like, do I have a hand up? Do I have any hands? Caleb?
Yeah, this is Caleb speaking, and I'll read. Without a doubt, the pandemic has shined a light on loneliness. Moore et al. 2014 says, loneliness is a powerful enemy of resilience, and loneliness is something that many people struggle with. You can have lots of people in your life and still have bouts of loneliness. It's even possible to be lonely in a crowd. The need for inclusion varies greatly from person to person. The important thing is that you are aware of your needs so that you do what you can to fill your life with the amount of human connection you need to be resilient.
All right, thank you. So I just recently read a stat that that teenagers throughout our country, 61% of teenagers right now are feeling this extreme amount of loneliness. So first off, I want to normalize that feeling if that's something that you've been going through, and I want to make sure that you understand that many people are feeling lonely and isolated right now during this pandemic. All right, but we can use some of our resilience to kind of overcome some of that. All right, so we've already talked about relational resilience. We've talked about flipping the switch. The next one is called surrendering the one up. And this is when you have somebody in your life that you just might have some kind of conflict with, right? There might be conflict and you might try and have an edge over this person. All right, but by surrendering the one up, we actually can live a more fulfilling life. Okay, so if you are struggling with somebody, you can think of the other person, you can build up the other person's sense of importance, you can respect the other person's personality rights, you can also give sincere appreciation for that person. Again, that's looking for the blessing. You can eliminate the negative. You can also avoid openly trying to reform people. Many of us try to do that, especially in this kind of politicized world right now. It's like, no, you have to see my point of view, see things from my lens, understand where I'm coming from, instead of just say, I accept you for who you are. We also need to try to understand the other person, and then check first impressions, and then develop genuine interest in people. There's this old book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And they talk about the biggest way, one of the best ways that you can do some of those things is to show a genuine interest in other people, and let them speak about themselves, right? And some of the things that are really of interest in their own lives. So surrendering the one up is another form of resilience. You can also keep it up. Street resilience is our next one. You use street resilience when you take the pain of disrespect, discrimination, and regret and use it as fuel to propel you forward. The author says street resilience is channeling your emotions, guiding them, directing them, and using them for a productive purpose instead of letting your emotions use you. Okay? So if you're going through something, if somebody's doubted you, you use that would be considered street resilience, and you use that to almost kind of like prove them wrong. All right, resource resilience. When you have resource resilience, you recognize that your resilience can be increased by tapping into the resources you currently possess or could potentially possess. So not only do you maximize your talents, mindset, abilities, relationships, money, physical assets, and personality traits, you also realize that you have undeveloped talents and untapped capabilities that you can also use or develop. And as you proactively acquire and build upon your resources, you become increasingly resilient. All right. And then our last one is rock bottom resilience, right? And many of us like to put on this face, right? We like to create this facade like we've got it all together. But what the data is showing is that most of us don't have it all together right now. So rock bottom resilience allows you to believe in your ability to change your circumstances, combat hopelessness, and fight on. Helps you believe in potential unforeseen options even during your most difficult times. It makes you increasingly aware that losing in the past does not equal losing in the future. All right, so final question. Which type of resilience do you possess? You can put that in the chat box. Do you have, are you able to flip the switch, right? Are you able to kind of say, you know what? I'm not going to continue thinking this way. I'm gonna think differently. Do you have relational resilience where you've got other people that are in your life that you feel like kind of depend on you, and when obstacles come your way, you focus in on the people that that either depend on you or care about you or love you, and you use that as a way to overcome obstacles. Do you work to surrender the one up, or do you need to surrender the one up, so that people that you might have conflict with in your life, you can kind of acknowledge them and say, you know what, this relationship hasn't gone as well as I'd hoped, but we can do something about that. Do you have street resilience, right? And then finally, do you have resource resilience? Not finally, do you have resource resilience? You're using different resources in your life to overcome things. And do you have rock bottom resilience, right? When things are really looking grim, you say, you know what? My problems of the past don't have to be my problems in the future. All right, put that in the chat box. Which source of resilience do you possess? Okay. As you finish up putting that in the chat box, I'd just like to go back to our Padlet. The last two columns, and again, some of you had already started this, which is totally fine, totally cool. But the last two columns, I want you to make a quick list of ways you can transform one of your current obstacles into something positive. So I just spoke with 30 kids from one of our highest performing schools in Kentucky the other day, and many of them were able to kind of answer these two. They were struggling with certain things, and they were able to answer these two things. And what this did was it showed them and other people that the things that they were going through were things that could be overcome. And again, it showed that they weren't the only ones struggling with certain things. So whatever you put in this Padlet is actually potentially going to help somebody else. Okay. Um, so in that third column, you're just making a quick list of ways you can transform one of your current obstacles into something positive. And then the final column, we just want to know, how are you coping with your academic workload? We know that the semester is ending. You might have midterms, you might have finals. How are you coping with that? What's going on with you? All right, so finish that up. Thank you for your time today. Before I let you go, would anybody like to chime in on how you're doing, things that might have helped you during this time, things that you're grateful for? Would anybody like to come to use your mic and let us know those things before we move on to the next topic?
Go ahead, Caleb.
This is Caleb speaking. First of all, Dr. Sweeney, I'd like to share an experience with you. So one of my really good friends recently lost her grandmother, and she's had a very difficult time. And so sort of in the wake of that, I have been, really attempting to be there for her and to help her through her struggle. And I actually showed I guess it was October's meeting, and we worked through some of the coping strategies that you had provided to us. So I sort of immediately thought of those because I know those really helped me. And I thought about during that meeting how I could use those to benefit here in my community. And so that was one example that I wanted to share with you, when it comes to
That's awesome. Thank you.
attempting to reach out and help other people through some of the resources that you provided. And then also, really focusing in on that, turning it. I'm definitely a person who relies on relational resilience to get me through, but also I have been attempting to think in the mindset of when I'm done with finals, I'll be able to enjoy the freedom of not having, that work to do. So I just wanted to share those things with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm so glad that you went back to our coping strategies, and I'm hopeful that you can recognize the resilience that you have and that you possess to overcome future obstacles too. Thank you, Caleb.
Anna.
Hi, this is Anna speaking. One thing I just wanted to share is something I've been personally doing, which is putting back into my family and making sure that they're mentally okay. So with my mom and my sister, I hold like spa nights and we talk and just check in with each other. So since we're already at home, I think building that relationship with our family more can really help us during this time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anna.
Anybody else want to share?
This is Renuka. I was just going to share about my college apps experience, as I'm sure many other people are experiencing during this time. And it has been really wild with with COVID and everything, and finding the resources. So I really found scheduling helpful. Researching about different college sessions and something which I normally would have access to at school. So I did a lot of online research and incorporated that into my schedules. And I really found scheduling to be helpful so that I find that college app, school, and home balance.
That's awesome.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
All right, Tony, just want to say it's always a pleasure to be with you students. So thank you for your participation. We'll definitely take the things that you put in the Padlet and use that as information that can fuel our next steps. Thank you.
Great. I also saw Christina Weeder is on as well, and I didn't know if Christina, if you wanted to add anything to the conversation with our students this morning.
Sorry, nothing specific. I think it's really great to hear from the students about how they're using these strategies and sharing them with other people. I think sometimes, sorry, let me make sure my video is on.
That's okay.
I think sometimes I know that when I have learned some new information and am able to then share that with others, it helps even reinforce in myself utilizing those strategies. So I think it's really great to hear how the students are doing that, incorporating them into their own lives, and as well as sharing those with other folks.
Absolutely. I think that kind of gives us a good affirmative in the work that certainly that we're doing here at the department. Certainly, as you know, we turn the chapter into the next year too. You know, the next time we see you all, it'll be 2021. So speaking of which, turning the new chapter into the next year, I believe Dr. Glass has joined us. He had an important phone call he had to take, but I believe he is back with us. Dr. Glass, are you there?
Hi, Tony. I am. Hi, everybody. I've been listening in for the past couple of minutes, just hearing Damien's check in. I don't know if Damien's still on, but that was always great to have him lead us through those and hear your responses. I appreciate that. Thanks, Damien. Tony, I wonder if we should jump right into the assessment part of the agenda. I know Dr. Woods Tucker is going to be on with us a little later, but I know he's caught up with a conversation with the Lieutenant Governor right now, so maybe we can rearrange and move that up. What do you think?
That's fine. That's perfect. I told them that you would also give them a couple of other updates. If you want to just go ahead and jump into assessment, and then we can, when Dr. Tucker gets on, we can maybe just put it all to wrap it all up. So.
Right. Well, maybe we can start with just some updates on, you know, what's going to happen with school in January, because I think that's on a lot of people's minds. And I think the only answer I can give you right now on that is we don't know. We are concerned about the level of virus community transmission that's taking place. I think that the governor's executive order, which closed down schools for this period that we're in right now, with the exception of elementary schools, but really there's just a handful of districts in the state that have elementary schools open. Practically the whole state is in NTI or remote right now. The reason that the governor did that, I think, is due to the rapidly rising cases in the state, increasing hospitalization rates, increasing death rates, and that the healthcare system is getting close to capacity in terms of the number of hospital beds that are available and ventilators that are available. So once we reach that point that all of the hospital beds are full, not only do you start losing more people to COVID, you start losing people to other kinds of illnesses because there's no space available to treat them. So things that would normally have been something that you could get admitted to the hospital for and get taken care of, they get delayed or pushed off, and so all those conditions become worse. So it's kind of this snowball effect of overwhelming the medical system. So with the rapidly rising number of cases and concerns around hospitalizations, and knowing that we were going into this period of Thanksgiving and a very social holiday there, then coming out of that for a couple of weeks and then going back into the holidays with Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's and all the things that happened there. You have another very social holiday. There was this real concern that we'd see this explosion or exponential jump in cases in the state. And that seems to be marching right up. We just keep seeing larger and larger cases that keeps happening. So one of the things that I think the governor wanted to do was see if we could use this period that we're in right now to flatten the curve back down, to get the cases back under control, reduce the number of community transmissions, and then restart again in January, much like we did in the spring, when really all across the whole country everything shut down for a period of a few weeks, and it helped get the virus under control. So there was an effort to see if we could do that again. I don't know that that's being effective. I think people are weary from all of the mitigation efforts that have been underway. And honestly, we may be past the point where it's controllable now. I mean, once it gets so widespread in communities, it is hard to contain. So that's I think where we are right now. And looking to January, I think that there's a lot of conversation going on around how well schools did managing the virus before the executive order. So we didn't have school-based transmission. Certainly that's possible. And in other states, we have seen school-based transmissions. But in Kentucky, we haven't seen large-scale outbreaks or really any confirmed outbreaks traced back to schools. If there are high levels of community transmission taking place, that's certainly possible, and I think honestly we should expect it. If we have high levels of community transmission, we go back to in-person learning, it's going to happen somewhere. So it's I would say likely to inevitable that we'll have some kind of school-based transmission. People are going to get sick, and someone may die as a result of that. But that has to be balanced against the disconnection, the loss of learning, the loss of experience that students all across the state are having right now. And is it worth the risk? I think is the really impossible, excruciating calculation that has to be done. Is it worth the risk to come back in January? So those discussions are happening right now. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that there's this balance that's that everyone is trying to find, and I know the governor is trying to find between how schools can get back to in-person learning and how we protect staff and communities from this virus. So I want to pause there and just see what thoughts you might have on that excruciating question of what should we do in January? What should the governor do? So one of our options is that we continue with the executive order, that we just keep school basically closed until such time that the numbers come down enough that they can be reopened. Another option is to make that decision contingent on something or conditional on something. Like we know we've got that color-coded metric that all of the districts in the state really are in the red on now, but that could be revised. So we could increase the limits on that, and as long as you stay under some limit, you're able to open. So that's an option. And a third option, I think, is to defer back to the local decision makers. So let each district decide themselves what they should do in their context. So let me pause there, and Tony, maybe we could have some folks raise their hands and just weigh in. I'd love to get the students' perspective on this really difficult question around what's the right thing to do coming back in January.
Absolutely. So it looks like we have a couple of hands. Sam, actually we have 6. So lot 7. So we'll start with Sam. And again, once again, just make sure you introduce yourselves before you speak for our interpreters.
My name's Sam Smith from Davis County High School. And it is of my personal belief that if the cases haven't gone down and the spread especially hasn't gone down, and even though we're pretty close to a vaccine, I don't think we're, within like the weeks that a majority of people would be able to have it. I think we should continue to close down. It seems that because the spread is so high, that going back to school would only increase that.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Next, we'll go to, let's see, I'll just go to the top of the list here. Caleb.
Hello, Caleb speaking. Good morning, Dr. Glass. First of all, really glad that you're here with us. When it comes to my personal opinion on this issue, really it just kind of relates back to looking at the issue as a whole and seeing that across the state, the numbers are worrisome, and so unless those numbers come down drastically by January, I do think that virtual learning is the best option for the state as a whole at this point. And I will say, from experience here in Breathitt County, we were really lucky up until the time period in which we switched to virtual learning full time. We really didn't have any mass outbreaks, and so that's great. However, we saw as the community spread increased, and I guess it's the incidence rate, that there were more students who were. I guess I should say that the worry of potentially catching the virus increased because there were students who were being quarantined. I mean, it was just really a stressful experience, and so it's hard to balance, and this, it's hard to balance education and public health, but right now I think that public health is really important, and so that's just my sort of take on things. Thank you.
Okay. Jack.
Hi, this is Jack Johnson speaking. So I was actually talking to my friend, two friends I'm going to talk about. One friend has a little brother and he's in first grade, and I was actually listening to him learning how to read. And I remember her talking about how whenever he was in school, he was making out exponential growth. I mean, he was just reading everything. And all of a sudden, he's having trouble reading basic passages. So I feel like, especially for our younger kids in our state, we need to be able to get them in person and just teaching them those basic skills, and even like the people skills, like sharing toys and stuff like that. So those are very important for like our younger generation or our younger kids. I also have a friend who has an eating disorder, and she has been homebound even before quarantine. And so she's very, what's the word? Like viable to catch it. And if she catches it, it could be bad. But she was talking about how she's just tired of being home and how she wants to be out. And she says, I'm literally willing to go to school if I can. Like as soon as we open up, I'm going back no matter what my doctor says, because she misses her friends that much. So even though I know there is a community risk in that, but we have to think about the kids that are really being affected, not right now, but the kids that'll be affected in the future too. Because who knows what, both of my examples, who knows what could happen in the future with them and like the little brother.
So Jack, just to follow up, if you were to give advice to the governor on what you think he should do in January, what would it be?
To go back to school or let it up to the communities, because I know in Louisville and Lexington, the cases have been high in those. But I'm in Little Marshall County. I got quarantined before, and I never caught it. I was with two people that did end up catching it, and it was outside school, and I never caught it. I mean, there's 50 people quarantined by one case, and a lot of them really didn't even have contact. It was just on a sitting chart. So, yep, that's it. Thank you, though.
Thank you. Oops, muted.
Oh, thank you, Jack. Roheen?
Hi, this is Roheen from Jefferson County, and what I think would be best is probably waiting it out a couple more weeks. So I don't know, maybe beginning of January, a week or two into January, and seeing where we are then, if the cases have gone down or whatnot. But also, I think readjusting the guidelines would be a bit helpful, making the red zone, orange zone thing a bit more lenient. And then from there, if some counties are still bad, that they obviously won't go to school. But I think I agree with Jack in that letting this communities decide what's best for returning to school or not. And of course, it's not going to be full capacity or whatever, but if like one county can go back to school safely, I think they should, because we're like students are losing out on a lot.
Okay. Thank you, Roheen. Lohit?
Hello, this is Lohit speaking. I think I agree with Roheen and Jack about the final consensus that we should leave it up to the district health departments to decide whether it's safe to go back, because community transition is a thing that differs vastly between each individual county. And just looking at the data from from what I saw a few weeks ago, our school Dunbar had the highest number of COVID-19 positive cases, and we didn't even go back to school. So the fact that we didn't go back, but we still had the most number of cases, indicates that the community transition rate is really high, and that's not even because of school. So that means that for other counties where they did let students go back to school, it's not comparatively, it's not that big of an issue about transition within schools, and there's also been external evidence to support that too. So looking to the data, I think letting the decision go to the district health departments is the best way to go.
Thank you, Lohith. We'll go to Layla.
Hi, this is Layla from DuPont Manual High School. In my opinion, we should stay out of school until the number of cases reaches a safer number. I haven't been in school since last March, but I do know that some counties have gone back to school. And I also know that the first student died from COVID a couple of weeks ago. And I know that nobody wants to be even held like semi-accountable for that because of prioritizing being in person over students' health. So I feel like in order to just get the best situation, I just feel like we should prioritize health over everything. So in my opinion, it should stay out of person until it reaches a better statistic.
Oh, muted, Tony.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to control the dogs behind me. The next one will go to Viviana.
Hi, this is Viviana speaking from Northern Kentucky. I agree with Layla that we should definitely stay out of school until the numbers decrease to a safer sort of like threshold. I think like it's definitely there's a challenge between, like do we prioritize physical health or do we prioritize like stronger education or mental health issues? But I feel like if we don't prioritize physical health first, there's definitely going to be some like a stunt. Like you can't focus on learning or mental health if you're not physically healthy. And then it also has been proven that COVID can, have lasting damage on those who have gotten it. So I think we should definitely prioritize physical health for our students first and make sure that we are returning to school if the numbers are too high. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go to Cade Scott.
Yeah, I have to agree with, I think, what the last couple of people have said, actually, including Viviana, that I don't think it would be smart to open right now. I think we actually closed at a very smart time. We waited a little bit longer because I know a lot of surrounding counties had closed before Floyd County did. But like right after we did, one of my friends got it that I would have been in direct contact with. And then now I know several of my younger cousins' classmates and even my classmates. Like there's several students every county or every school in the county right now that have like an active case, either in their house or themselves. But I mean, I don't think that there's no like doubt that it has negative effects on like educational success and then even like behavioral and social well-being. But I just don't think that it would I think that we should wait until we're out of the red. Cases are like it's bad enough here where I don't know. I'm kind of like torn on whether it should be left up to the individual counties, but I don't know that it isn't just smarter to just wait until leave it at a specific guideline that if you're in the red you can't reopen. But then I also wanted to ask, not to change the complete subject, but is there a plan for is there a plan for teachers getting the vaccines? Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, that they were on the governor's, or the state's priority list to receive it. So is there, something in place?
Yeah, I can address that really quickly. The governor let superintendents know last week to start thinking about how they would collect lists of staff members, teachers, but also other people that work in buildings, your custodial staff, your bus drivers, your food service staff, principals, folks like that, other people that work in buildings, to start collecting lists of who was willing to take it. Because they're going to see if they can change the ordering of who gets the vaccine to move teachers up higher in that distribution. It still will be several months until we have enough vaccine to get to them, but it does move them up. The cost of that is that Who gets moved down are folks like senior citizens who aren't in a residential facility. That's who's going to get moved down in that list. So they'll have to wait longer to get that. So it's another one of those excruciating trade-offs that we have to make. But yes, there is conversation happening in Kentucky around prioritizing education staff for vaccination. Oh, muted, Tom.
I got it. Our next one, let's go to Gavin in E-Town.
Yeah, hi, I'm Gavin Brunig, and I'm from E-Town. And I completely agree with the last two students that right now it's not the best idea to open, but whenever we do inevitably open again, I think it should probably be left up to the individual counties. And personally, I think it should be probably left up to the parents of the students, whether their student should go to school. Because let's take Jack's example, for example. The student that he was talking about, the first grader who he said was learning better in person. Let's say that their parents think, well, he learns better in person. I think that should be up to the parent that the student should go back in person. If there is another first grader, for example, that learns fine both ways, then I think it would probably be safer for them to stay home. So I think it should be more up to the families and up to the districts whenever we go back in person.
Thank you, Gavin. We'll go to Peyton.
Gavin, Tony, if I could interject.
Oh, go ahead.
Just a question for Gavin, follow. Gavin, when would you recommend that transition takes place? Like, when does it go from being everybody's remaining closed to being the local decision?
That's a good question. Definitely not right now. There needs to be time for the cases to go down. But I'm thinking probably we'll have to keep an eye on the cases. But at the moment, I'm probably thinking end of January. Just give it time to level out, settle down.
Thank you.
All right, you're gonna go to I think it's Miles.
I also agree with Gavin with what he said about waiting till the end of January, because I think right now most schools are set to go back within the first 2 weeks. And I think that, like, with the holidays and everything, especially New Year's, just giving it that extra, like, 1 to 2 weeks to kind of level off would be very smart.
Okay. All right, going next to Renuka.
Hi, this is Renuka. So I think we need to stay virtual until because like Lohith mentioned earlier, I'm also a Dunbar student, and personally for our county, the cases have been increasing. And although it is important to prioritize health, there's also the drawbacks faced by many students with disabilities, low-income families. And, right now we need to work on developing new support systems for these families and focusing less on, finding ways to go back to school given the rise in cases. But if we do get a significant decline in cases, then we can kind of transition into developing the effective safety protocols to sending these students back into schools. Yep, that's my stance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Layla.
Hi, this is Layla speaking from Jefferson County. Overall, I would just say that I definitely think we should hold off until going back to in-person class and schools. And I know this is like a tug on your heart because all of us have experienced some way of like this feeling of isolation and not being able to socialize with people. And I know that can be so hard for all students and all teachers and all staff in schools. But I think one of the big ideas, like others have mentioned, is that if we were to go back to in-person school, it would be a huge sacrifice for people's physical health, especially like if we're considering people who drive buses. custodians, there could be teachers who are like older and really aren't very safe or are at high risk. And I think a lot of that, those elements could cause us to have less adequate conditions when we do go back to in-person school. I know for my school personally, there are at least 40% of the teachers that aren't willing to go back if we were to go to in-person school, which could cause a lot of strain on teachers and admin. And I think overall, if I were to be able to actually talk to the governor and suggest an idea, I know this is a big idea, but I would actually recommend that we lock down specifically after the holidays, maybe after like New Year's, and then we'd be able to allow that time, because I know a lot of people sacrifice like their Thanksgiving celebration so that with hopes that they would be able to go hang out throughout like December or winter break with their families. And so I believe there is a high risk that many people will go and travel and end up coming back and causing exposure to their family members, to classmates and whatnot. So if we were to be able to have like some sort of complete isolation, including like going to see friends or going to your neighbor's house or whatever it may be, and then giving it about 6 weeks and coming back in the middle of February, depending on like what the vaccine status is and whatnot, then it's possible that maybe we could bring in elementary school students who need that social interaction to develop their emotional behaviors, and also like ECE students or special education, because I know it's so hard for ECE teachers to be able to provide the necessary accommodations for whatever they may need. So that's just sort of my take on things.
Some very good points. I didn't know if Commissioner, if you were wanting to talk or.
No, I was just listening. I've been kind of keeping a tally as people have been going and taking notes. So thank you.
Great. Gracie.
Yeah, it's Gracie speaking. So in my opinion, I agree that we should hold off until probably late January or February until reopening. But I also agree that this is really taking, like a little girl close to me, for example. She's always had really good grades and things like that. And she's failing almost every class because of NTI that she has. And it's really frustrating on her, I know, because she was on like a beta club and everything, and she had been really excited about that. But some students really just can't learn in this way. I don't think it's really, I personally haven't felt like I've learned as much as I could have since we started. And I know that it's really taken a toll on a lot of people's mental health and even academic, their academic, I can't think of a word, but I'm just kind of torn about what we should do at this point. But I do agree that I think right now isn't the best time to open. But when it is, I think it should be left up to where your county is on COVID cases and the community as a whole.
And Gracie, what are your thoughts? Because you are one of our students. You go to KSB and then also Central High School. So I'm just curious with your thoughts with the School for the Blind.
So I live in Hardin County, but I go to school in Jefferson County. So it's a really unique situation. Sorry, just a second.
Okay.
I also stay home with 3 siblings. Go.
We can all relate.
All my parents work. So I also have to stay home and help with them, and I know that I'm not a very good teacher. But my situation is really unique because, especially for the School for the Blind, we literally come from everywhere in the state. So we haven't been back since March because Jefferson County has been so high that taking some of the students from lower risk communities and putting them in a higher risk community is a really bad idea. And the fact that a lot of students at my school, as well as having issues with their sight and things also have a lot of health issues. Many of the students that go there do. And I think that for specialty schools like KSD and KSB, I think it's a lot harder of a decision. But I also think that it should be up to parents and things like that once they can finally reopen.
Thank you, Gracie. Peyton.
Hi, this is Peyton. I go to Fleming County High School. I think that we should leave it up to the communities, especially for small communities. It's so easy for us to get in that red status. Initially, in like September, we had one outbreak in one community business, and that put us already in the red. So like using that as a factor to tell whether or not schools should go back to school, I don't know if it always works for small communities. Also, I was reading a study yesterday out of Texas, and it showed that prior to students having to do their schoolwork at home, I think it was like 20% of students in the state had at least one failing grade, and it had risen to 50% of students in the state. And so I don't know how that'll correlate back to Kentucky, but I do know that a lot of students are struggling to do their schoolwork, and not only doing their schoolwork, but to sit behind a computer screen all day and having little interaction and sitting in the same place all day, every day is just not good for mental health as well. So I think that it should be left up to districts. I know that my district, we were 8 weeks in person, and we received one case in our middle school, and the whole district shut down completely. And everybody in that middle school quarantined for 2 weeks. And then after that, we went back to school, and we only got to go for that week before Thanksgiving break. But I believe that if schools are transparent like mine is, so on our school website, you can see where the cases are in the community, well, within the school district. So even with our online students, you can see if they tested positive or if they're quarantined. So I think it's important for schools to be transparent. And if they agree with the health department, I think it should be strictly up to the schools.
Oh, muted, Tony.
Gosh darn it. Sorry about that. We will next go to, Drake. It looks like Drake.
Hi, this is Drake, and I'm from Cowley County. And I just want to start by saying I think it's imperative that we prioritize physical health and that we protect our super seniors and any of those vulnerable. And I am part of a really small school in the western corner of our state, so I speak on the dynamic of the rest of the Commonwealth. However, nothing in my educational career has caused more apathy than this. And when I applied for this council on our application, when speaking on like the number one issue that I thought affected our schools, I said it was apathy, teachers being apathetic and students as well. And I feel like if we don't make it a long-term goal to get back in school or to find normalcy, we're just going to continue to see people disregard education and lose passion for things that used to be like a number one like incentive in their life and just like a source of light for them. And without school and being in person, I feel like it's really hard to find purpose when attending school every day was like such a part of our routine. But again, I just feel like it's a conundrum, for lack of a better word, because how do we choose to put people at risk, but also recognize like there are so many issues behind the scenes? So that's just my take.
Drake, what would, if you were advising the governor, what would you tell him he should do?
I think leaving it up to the communities and the health departments is probably best, just because every community is different. But I don't know, I think schools offering different modes of education so that parents and families can choose what's best for them is also vital, and just giving people a choice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Drake. Trevin.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. This is Trevin, and I'm from Pike County. And to start out, one thing we all agree on is the spread that we have seen lately is very alarming, and we just have to take that in consideration when we're going back to school. I know a lot of people feel that we should leave it up to the communities and the Board of Educations and the health departments, but the problem I have with that is if we have 6 counties red and one county decides that they're going to go back anyway, that defeats the purpose. Like, we have to have a united front and come together to beat it. I mean, we can't be this red county does this red county does this. We have to all come together and do the same thing. And in Pike County, when we come to school, that's increasing the risk for our senior citizens, because we have a lot of grandparents in Pike County that raise their grandchildren. And I have a great grandfather still living, and I'm not willing to go to school to risk him, to let him die. I mean, it's a very touchy situation, I feel. And alone in Pike County, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, we have seen a large increase since we had our first positive. And I have a unique situation as well, because I have a little sister that's in the 1st grade. I'm in high school, and my mother is the teacher. If you ask my mother, she would tell you that she is also not ready to go back. She is scared to go back because we have taken every precaution necessary, and we're just frightened to get it. Like, my grandfather, her father, has black lungs, so he's in the high-risk category. And I just really don't think it's a good idea, especially with New Year's and Christmas, because there are going to be people that get together. And we don't know what's going to happen with that. So if I was speaking to the governor and I was giving him my advice, I would set a target date to return for in-person or hybrid by February 1st. And I really wouldn't consider going back at all in January, because we have to give it enough time for the spread from get-togethers of New Year's and Christmas. We have to let that span out and take its toll and see what it's going to do.
All right. Thank you very much, Trevin. We'll go to, looks like Logan. And I did want to express my sympathy and our sympathy to the students in Fayette County on the loss of your superintendent. So our condolences to you all. Logan, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Logan Justice from Fayette County, and I also go to Dunbar, like our other Fayette County students. But I did just kind of want to echo kind of what the past people have kind of talked about, of how starting not exactly early in January, simply because I think, like somebody else mentioned, they sacrificed Thanksgiving without their families to hopefully kind of close in their circle for, you know, these weeks before these December holidays, so that they can meet with their families. In the case that they do get COVID and spread that, you know, I think like our other holidays have seen in the past, and the data shows that roughly the 2 weeks after that, you do see like an increase in cases. So, you know, those cases theoretically would, you know, be in the schools, say, even if it was 2 weeks after January 1st. And so then those like, I guess, recourse of that could go on for another, like, you know, 6 weeks with different students getting COVID, spreading it to more students and on. So if we could kind of cut that to a minimum and starting later in January, early February, I think that would probably be the best option if we were to go back. I know Fayette County, we haven't been back yet this year, and we were actually given a survey back in November about what we would want to do in January. Me and my family, we picked to start later and not go back virtual for that first, I think 6 weeks is what our school is doing, is when you get to like change your selection if you'd like to. But I also think having that decision is important for the students and families.
Thank you. So I see a couple of hands here that are still raised. I didn't know if you all wanted to provide some additional feedback. We do have a couple of minutes. I know Dr. Woods Tucker is going to join us. I know he has a short presentation, but we do have a few minutes, and this is a very important topic. So I just want to take a moment. If you still have your hands raised, and that's just by accident, you haven't unraised your hand, if you can unraise your hand. If not, I will call on you, and just if you can keep your comments a little brief. just so we can try to stick to our agenda and still get to the assessment part, and have Dr. Woods Tucker talk to you a little bit about the things he'd like to talk to you about. I'll go back to Sam.
This is Sam Smith from Davis County. And I did just kind of want to point out that, at least for me, I went back to a hybrid where half the school goes in person. And we were really just getting back onto Google Meets and having pretty much a normal, like all virtual class, except half of us were in the classroom. I didn't see much benefit to being half in person. And I also think there's more options than just hybrid, all in person or all virtual. Our school is doing where all the failing seniors, which is about 30 people, are coming back in to the school and having class in person that way, assuming their teachers are okay with it. So I think there are more ways than just like all hybrid or all virtual.
Thank you. That's good to know. It's always good to hear of different examples that are going on. That's exactly, we like to hear those examples. Viviana?
So this is Viviana speaking. I know a lot of people have expressed that they believe that the decision whether to go back or not once the time is appropriate should be left up to local sort of like districts and schools. But in my case, before we went on like a state mandated NTI kind of like shutdown thing, my school or my community district was in the red zone, but my school decided to go back full time despite the fact that we were in red. And so that definitely brought up a lot of concerns within our community, because my school is very big, and so are many of the other schools in the district. So a lot of people were concerned and confused as to why that decision was made, considering how many cases we had in our community. So that would definitely be a concern in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jack.
This is Jack speaking. I just want to say that whenever we close down schools, there is a low chance that it will slow down cases, because I know a lot of my friends are not staying at home. They're still out and about. They're still hanging out with other people. And I live in a different county where I go to school, and I've seen that with where I live, and I also see that with the county I go to school in. There is still, if not more, interaction than there was whenever we were in school. Because even in school, it was like confined. You're around the same people for the most part. Also, I want to say that our school provides a hybrid, so to say, that you have the choice on whether to go back or not go back. So I know there's people that have said that they don't feel safe going back to school. Then you don't have to go back to school. Then you do an online school. But the people that almost need to go back to school for mental health reasons or just to get out of their house, and they feel safe being there, they have the option to go back. Same thing with teachers. So I feel like doing that provides kind of the best of both worlds, and also providing districts, because if there is a district, for example, if they had 0 cases in the whole county, they should have the option to go back to school. That just makes sense. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Layla?
Hi, it's Layla from Jefferson County again, and I wanted to say that I agree with Layla's point that we should go in complete lockdown. I think that would be hard to implement, but I also feel like as we've been in quote unquote quarantine since March and the cases are still rising, we've been in the red zone, it's quite obvious that what we're doing now isn't working. And I know everyone wants to go back to school, so I feel like that would be the most effective way to get us back in school as soon as possible.
All right. Thank you. Let's look here. It looks like Peyton.
Yeah, it's Peyton again. I'm going to piggyback off of what Jack said. And so something that my superintendent released a few months ago was that schools are one of the safest places for students to be right now, especially in rural communities, because within schools, students are wearing their masks, they are socially distancing, they're getting that social interaction that they need, so that now after school, they don't have to go hang out with their friends. They can go home because they've already gotten that social interaction. Without being in school, students are they're riding around in cars with no mask. They're going to Walmart, they're going to all these places hanging out, and they're not socially distancing. They're hanging out with people that they wouldn't hang out with. And we have no way of tracking who those students are around. But when you're in school, you can pretty much track who everyone is around, and so that it's easier to notify if there is a positive case. So I do think that it is important that we look at how safe schools may be and how much easier they can make the process by letting students still go to school if that is what their families and their community chooses.
Okay, great. Thank you. Caleb?
This is Caleb speaking. I actually just have a couple thoughts that I'd like to add after listening to everyone share their opinions out of the people who shared. So, being from a rural community, I see that, there are limited opportunities for communication and for socialization, especially now during times of COVID. However, just from my personal opinion, I think it's really important that we ensure 100% that our schools are not at the epicenter of spread in our communities, right? And so looking at it from the perspective of schools being in part a government entity, it's important to ensure that, our schools are opening responsibly. And so when it comes to allowing that decision to be made on the local level, I think that a lot of your school districts in Kentucky will take the precautions necessary and will be careful. And I'm in all honesty, I do think that most schools will, but there are schools who have opened up during, while their county is in the red category on the statewide map. And so it just really brings into question, how different, how different communities are going to react. And so, here in rural communities like Eastern Kentucky, Breathitt County, for example, there are people who are coming from, like, for example, we have one Walmart, which is sort of where people from several counties gather to shop for their groceries, for example. So it's important to remember that, when you're looking at these rural communities, there is a lot of intercommunity interaction. And so with that, it's just really important to look at this issue holistically and to be able to see that, it's important to ensure that our schools are not at the middle of spread. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trevin, go ahead.
Okay, I'll be quick this time. When they brought up about like people getting together, even if we do shut down our schools, friends, like let's say there's a group of 4 friends, and let's say one of them does have COVID-19, but they get together. Okay, so there is probably 4 cases. So let's say our schools are open and each of those 4 students go back to school. Then there's a chance for it to spread even wider because chances are those 4 friends aren't going to have every single class together. So although we can't control what people do, we can contain to who it spreads to. Although it would spread to those 4 friends, it's not going to spread to a mass amount of students that might gather in.
Yeah, Trevin makes a good point. It's I was on Kentucky Tonight last night with several other education leaders and including Senator Wise and board member Allison Sloan and someone from the Association of Jim Flynn from the Association of School Superintendents, a superintendent from Union County, and Eric Kennedy from the Kentucky Association of School Boards. And this concept that if students aren't in school, then they're out in communities causing community spread was advanced several times. I think that's a theory. I don't know that we have any data to prove or disprove it. It is raised a lot. People say, well, if kids aren't in school, then they'll be out in community spreading the virus. Well, maybe. But I do hear that being raised, but I just want to state that I don't think we know, or we don't know the extent to which that's taking place. there's just a lot that we don't know, but I do hear that being raised up. Tony, this has been really helpful to me, and thanks all of you for your thoughtful comments and discussion. I think what we've raised up is there really isn't any easy choice here. There's no perfect option. Every one of our choices is difficult. And involves something that we would like not to happen. I mean, no one wants us to stay in this virtual remote world for any longer than we have to. We also don't want to create environments where anyone is unsafe and we're putting our communities at risk. So no one wants that either. So this is just a really difficult decision. We are working with other groups in the state and working with public health on advising the governor on what to do. This has been really helpful. I will factor it into our recommendation to the governor. Ultimately, the governor is the person that makes the decision right now. When the legislature gets back in session, they may start making decisions as well. But I think this is really helpful. It's really why I think advisory councils exist like this, so you can give feedback to me on important decisions that we have to make. Tony, I know that we went way over on the time that we had for this, but honestly, I think this is what we needed to talk about. This is the decision that's on everybody's mind right now, and so it's what we should be talking about. I know Dr. Woods Tucker is on and can update folks on the some of the anti-racism and equity work that we have underway. I want to give him plenty of time for that. So, Tony, if you don't mind, I'll just briefly update folks on where we are on assessment. We don't have to have a conversation about that. Honestly, there's less that we know and that we can do right now. I think spending this time talking about what school looks like in January was the best thing for us to spend our time on. Just very quickly, on the assessment front, we were told by the U.S. Department of Education in September that we should prepare to administer assessments. Of course, a lot's happened since September, including that we are going to have a new Secretary of Education with the new administration that comes in January. So that new Secretary of Education may have a different opinion and perspective on whether or not states are going to administer assessments. States are required to administer assessments because we take federal money. And when you take federal money, you also take the federal oversight and federal direction and the federal rules that come with that money. One of those rules is that you have to give an assessment. So the only way that we can't give an assessment is if the Secretary of Education waives states out of having to give it, which is what happened last year. Secretary DeVos did waive states out of that. And then this fall, she said, I'm not waiving anybody out of it. You should get ready to give it. But we have seen the cancellation of a national test called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP. It's called the NAEP test. The NAEP tests were canceled. That's a national assessment. So that's a good indicator of where assessments may go nationally. We may see another cancellation of them like we did this past fall. We at the Kentucky Department of Education, what we're doing is to have an assessment available in case we have students present or districts are able to give it. That assessment will be shorter than it has been in the past, and there'll be more flexibility on when it can be given. The results won't be used for any accountability purposes, so we won't be using it to sort of rate schools or give schools a rating. The reason for that is because we don't have good controls over who is in school and who's not, and who can take it. If you can't control the testing environment, you can't validate that the results are accurate. So in that case, we shouldn't be using it to sort of rate any school, because there's just a lot that we don't know about what the conditions were where students were tested, and is there bias in who was tested and who wasn't. Because we don't know that, it's not appropriate for us to use it for accountability. So I think where we are, our three paths forward are: we end up giving the assessment in some form in the spring. That form will be shorter and more flexible than what we have experienced. That's a possibility. Another possibility is that some places are able to give it and some are not because they're able to have school and some aren't. And a third possibility is that they're all canceled. So I think those are the three pathways forward for assessment that we have before us. I think, Tony, now we should turn things over to Dr. Woods Tucker to let him lead the folks through his presentation, and then I'll come on at the end to close this up.
Perfect. Dr. Woods Tucker, are you on?
How you doing, Mr. Statman?
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure you were still with us. I figured you were. I thought I saw your little light on.
Yes,
So.
I am. Yes, I am. Very heartfelt, intriguing conversations.
Wonderful. So I'll go ahead and get your PowerPoint if you wanted to. Hold on, I'm going to go grab it real quick, and we'll go ahead
no
and share.
problem. I'm sure the students enjoy me talking during this time. Again, it's for you all. I couldn't imagine that you all would be impacted by COVID, and I don't think anyone could have imagined that you would be impacted by COVID for almost a year. You know, we started this in March, so we're looking at almost 9 months right now. And I have 3 teenagers, and I just couldn't have imagined this. And several of you talked about the emotional impact, and I know Dr. Sweeney has talked about that as well. And I want to say this, and I hope that my comments are represented throughout the Commonwealth, certainly represented through KDE as well. The academic stuff is good, and we want students to be successful. You know, the written test is important, but the road test of life is the most important test here, how you're feeling. And when I talk with my children, my 3 teenagers, and I talk with students like you all, it's not a big concern about the academic things. It's really about how you're feeling emotionally. And I want you all to know that Commissioner Glass and our Kentucky Board of Education and all of our folks here at KDE and your local school districts care about that. They care about how you're feeling emotionally. And we know that there's a huge void that's missing, and the need to socialize. I mean, that's part of our humanity. The need to belong, the need to socialize. And it's also one of the important things about American public education. We have that opportunity. And so please know that we do understand and we share those things that you're dealing with. And we want to hopefully be with you as we get back to a new normal. I'm sure you've heard an update from your local superintendents, and Dr. Glass reminds us that a vaccine is on the way, will be delivered here in a few weeks. And so that should be the start of a new beginning, and we can get back to having regular school here in the Commonwealth. I wanted to talk with a little bit with you all about racial equity and academic content, a question that came about a couple of our meetings ago. And so I want to let you know where we are here at KDE. I also have Mickey Ray. Miss Ray is on with us. She's in the Office of Teaching and Learning, and so she may jump in. But I want to give you a quick few-minute overview of some of the equity-related initiatives relative to teaching and learning here in the Commonwealth. We start with the Kentucky Academic Standards. These academic standards really have been around since Dr. Tucker was in high school my senior year. It started in the 80s, about 1983, where the country came together, particularly under the governors and president, and said that we need to put together a list of academic standards of what students should know and be able to do. And the purpose of this really is about equity. It's equitable in terms of ensuring that every student, regardless of his or her socioeconomic background, regardless of his or her zip code or ethnicity, would have an equitable access to grade level appropriate learning, again, for all students. It was well articulated in terms of what students should know at what grade level, what students should be able to demonstrate that they know during certain grade levels. And again, this has been around since the early 80s. And then in 1989, under Governor George W. Bush, they came together with a group of governors and really made this more national in creating what was the first time in creating national standards. That came after a scathing report, as I said, when I was in high school. In 1983, it was a report called A Nation at Risk that really badmouthed our school systems. And I want to say to you all, we have the best overall school system in the world. Are there things that we need to change and we can improve? Absolutely. But in terms of making our educational system equitable for everyone, regardless of who comes to our public schools, we have the best school system here in America. And we're committed here at KDE in improving the system, as you're hearing, and we're talking about equity. We know equity is one of the ways that we can improve our school system. And I can say that is the case systems across America. So again, it starts with the standards, ensuring that every student has access to high quality academic standards. We're also involved in an initiative that's called the Council of Chief State School Officers, for which our very own Dr. Glass is one of the members. And one of the initiatives is to ensure that we have high quality instructional resources. And not only having high quality standards is an equity issue, it's also, in my opinion, a civil rights issue. Along with that, we need high quality resources. Why set these standards if your teachers don't have the resources to create curriculum? Very briefly, the State Department of Education, KDE, we create standards in terms of what students should know and be able to do. Your local school districts create the curriculum, the instructional materials to reach the standards. And so we're lucky to be one of 13 13 states across the country that's working to equip and empower local schools in evaluating, selecting, and providing high quality instructional resources to all students that, again, are aligned to the grade level indicators or the grade level assignments, with an eye towards equity, ensuring that our students have a voice in the curriculum, that they see themselves in the curriculum, which is really important, and that the curriculum reflects the diversity of our student body. I mean, that is huge. Also, you may have heard of this in your local schools, the multi-tiered support system, MTSS system. I know Dr. Sweeney is on, and he's probably talked about this as well. And it's a cross-agency project here in the Kentucky Department of Education. And what we're doing, we're establishing guidance on this framework, not only to help schools and districts provide more equitable services to reaching students in regards to instruction, but also with intervention practices that we're providing Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 intervention practices to meet the whole child. So we're providing academic support, and we're providing behavioral and social emotional support to meet the needs of all of our students. And then the next thing that I'm really excited about that we're doing here is our equitable practices in our policy scan. When I came here on November 1st, I reached out to our local superintendents, we have about 171 local school districts here, independent school districts here in the Commonwealth. And I asked those superintendents to tell us a story, about equitable practices that are happening in their districts, equitable practices that are in place to really get students involved, to tell the students, to tell the stories of their entire student body, whether the students, were part of a lower socioeconomic status, meaning that students received free and reduced lunch, whether students came from wealthy backgrounds, regardless of the student's gender, regardless of what gender students identified with. We want to look at every aspect of the student body. And we wanted our superintendents to tell us the story about what they're doing to meet the needs of all their students in an inclusive way, because that's the whole business. We want to ensure that we're including students in everything that we do, that we're providing a voice to our students. And I didn't want to come here, council members, I didn't want to come here thinking that we're not doing anything here in the Commonwealth to meet the needs of our students. There are some school districts that are doing some amazing work. Now, is there a lot of work we need to do? Absolutely. There's a lot of work we need to do to work towards equity and inclusion. So I also asked the superintendents to let us know what type of equity and inclusion plan and what type of action plans that they had. And several weeks ago, I met with our teacher advisory committee chairperson, and I asked her to tell me more about this teacher advisory committee. It's made up of teachers, about 20 or so teachers across the Commonwealth, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, teaching different subjects at different levels. And I asked them to take this scan or this survey that I sent out to superintendents. And there should be a link around here somewhere, and I don't mind if you all take a look at it as well. Asking questions about equity, asking questions about diversity, asking questions about inclusion. And so I am going to present those results to the teacher committee here in the next couple of weeks, and then subsequently I'll have a conversation with our superintendents and the best practices that we're going to share out throughout the entire state, because I really believe the power lies in our collective. The power lies in our collective. And here are some of the, as Mrs. Tapman is getting to some of the questions. Here are some of the questions that we asked. I think one of the first questions we asked was, what does equity mean in your school? How do you demonstrate equitable practices in your school or community? Do you currently have an equity and inclusion plan? Because I really believe, again, the power is not just in the equity practices, but what are your action plans? What are you doing to improve equity? What are you doing to improve the treatment, the culture, and the climate of students and staffs in your school district? So that is huge. And I want you all to know this, and you probably have heard me say this multiple times. We're in a really good spot here in Kentucky because our state board of education and our commissioner believe in this. I just got off the phone with our lieutenant governor, who is really helping us to come up with some funds to diversify our teaching workforce. We have a fantastic program here called the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching, because we know students do better when they see teachers who look like them, teachers who come from their background. So we're doing some really neat things here in the Commonwealth. And then we're also asking our superintendents and asking our teachers, is equity included in your district strategic plan? Because what we know from experience, those things get measured, or those things that get done. I mean, we can talk about equity and we can talk about implicit bias, but are we measuring it? Do we have explicit outcomes in mind in terms of how we're measuring our progress? And again, I'm happy to say that we have quite a few districts here. We need to share this, to really make this more powerful. We need to engage in collective thought. We're sharing those districts that have fantastic strategic plans and action plans for equity. We're sharing those plans out. And so we're doing those two things and excited about it. And certainly we're asking you, because this impacts you most, and we want to hear from you. What are some things that we can do to ensure that our students and our staff feel more comfortable, more accepted in the school systems? And now I'll take any questions or listen to any concerns or even suggestions that you all have, because again, we want to hear your voice and we want to value suggestions that you have.
All right, so it looks like we have a hand up. Anna?
Hi, this is Anna speaking. Dr. Woods Tucker, I really liked what you said about having teachers and staff that actually look like the students. Because I haven't had that personal experience, I really want that for students within the Commonwealth. So I think that's a good thing to strive for.
Thank you, and it's great to have the backing by our governor, lieutenant governor, our state board of education, and our commissioner, as well as we are trying to get funds to do that. We now have a body of research in terms of how we can better attract a more diverse teaching workforce. At first, we really left it up to our own school district, or we left it up to our own creativity, but now we have a body of research for practices that do work to not only attract but also retain teachers from different backgrounds and different ethnicities.
And if you guys would like to speak, just raise your hand. And I'd like to include that in your exit slip, which I'm currently still creating, so you might have to get that via email. If you all want to research and see if your district has an equity and inclusion action plan, or if equity is included in your district strategic plan, if these are things that you're not aware of currently, we'd love to hear that. So maybe I'll put that in the exit form, and you can check. This is certainly something that you can ask your districts about. As a student, if this is something you're interested in, I would encourage you to ask your superintendent and ask, as a student leader in your building. Every one of you have mentioned, I remember sitting in on the interviews when you wanted to get, interest, when you gauged your interest in getting onto the council. Everyone mentioned, equity and wanting to speak up for others. So in terms of, not really, if you look at the questions, while it is kind of geared for our superintendents and teachers, I certainly can provide those options for you all to look into. And to provide feedback for us too as we move on to this next step, if that's something that you would be interested in. Go ahead, Caleb.
Caleb speaking. Really grateful
Hi,
to have
Caleb.
you with us, Dr. Woods Tucker. I just wanted to add a thought that came to mind as I listened to you speak, and I took some notes because I'm just that type of person. Actually, yesterday I was really blessed to join some education leaders here in my community and talk with them about our district's comprehensive improvement plan and that multi-tiered systems of support that you mentioned. Our school district is working to implement that, and I can't remember the original policy that will change once that does happen. And right now we're struggling with that because of COVID. And really, I think that it's just so important to note that, our districts are working to try and support students, and especially students who need that extra support in terms of the tiered system. But I also wanted to thank you because I hadn't really thought about you mentioned the equity action plan, and so that's something that I'm going to look at. Maybe encouraging the implementation of it here in Breathitt County. And so I actually wanted to ask you if you have any advice for me moving forward and how I could take that back to my home community. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Caleb, you sound like a future board member. So you are right on track, man, and as well as the other members here on this group. Asking the questions. Be respectful, but be fearless in asking the questions because it's important. The future, I would say that the future of our this hinges on the future of our country, but future means down the road. I mean right now, because if we don't look at social and emotional learning when we talk about this multi-tiered support system. Again, I know we have Dr. Sweeney here, and who's a huge supporter for us. We have to even look at the social emotional development of our young people, and our adults, our teachers as well, because our teachers, Caleb and other folks, they're hurting as well. We have to look at that with an equity lens as well. Are we keeping that great balance of academic support, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, academic support with that same level of social and emotional support? You talked a little bit about what you can do. I would go back to, I think I think you mentioned a comprehensive school improvement plan, if you will, which is very much like a strategic plan. I would ask, what are the measurable goals? What are the explicit goals of this plan? Okay, you have 4 or 5 goals that you're going to have. Then how are you going to measure them? If one of your goals is to increase social and emotional support for students, how are you measuring it? I would ask my school district, I would ask my principal, how do we measure it? And for some of you, and again, Jefferson County has done a great job with diversifying. It's trying to diversify its teacher workforce. Right here in Frankfort, local school district is doing a great job towards equity. But again, I would tie explicit outcomes to those goals. Okay, here's the goal. What are the outcomes?
I am muted. If some of you would like to talk about what does equity mean to your school community? Does anybody want to take a shot at that question? And, again, equity, is more, as Dr. Woods Tucker has talked about, is more than a person's skin color or a person's background beliefs. It's about, the whole, we talk about the whole child a lot. Jack, do you want to, I saw Jack's hand pop up there. Jack, do you want to talk about what equity means, or do you have another comment for Dr. Tucker? You might be muted. It looks like you're still muted. I can unmute you. Let's see if I can unmute you. I cannot unmute you. Looks like you're just muted. All right, well, he tried to figure that out. Does anybody else want to talk a little bit about what equity means, what you think equity means to your school community? Or are there any other comments that you might have for Dr. Woods Tucker?
My computer is messing up and it's being extremely laggy. So I did not mean to raise my hand. I'm trying to get everything sorted out. Sorry.
No,
gotcha.
I do have a.
Logan, it looks like Logan raised his hand though.
Dr. Woods Tucker, would you like to ask your question?
Oh, well, first, Logan, we'll hear from you, and then I will pose my question to the group. And it's a question that even, adults are having some difficulty answering. And I just want to get some ideas from our students, and maybe some ideas that we glean from you, we can share with adults. And I know, again, I mentioned Dr. Sweeney's name quite a bit. His area actually it was across the KDE, put together some talking points on how to have courageous conversations about ethnicity, equity, and race. And I want to talk a little bit about that if we have some time. But Logan, I want to hear your question first.
I was just gonna say, when I think of like equitable, when I first think of equity, I go straight to like opportunities and resources for students. And so I think when we think about that, we first have to make those opportunities, make those resources and stuff. And I think there might be like a point where once we make those, we don't always, I guess, follow through with those, and trying to make our students aware of those and encouraging them to, take part in those, and I guess making them aware of all of the like resources that they actually have, and that people are working to give them. I know going through a few different classes and different, I guess, presentations that our counselors have done, you learn that there's a lot more out there. And even my own personal research, there's a lot of like different scholarships and programs and just different things out there that without, actually taking the step yourself and like taking it up on yourself to look for, you would have never known. So I think making it a priority to actually help those students and like having it a time for in school to tell your students about those opportunities and make them aware and encourage them and help them go through those processes would be important in just making those resources, so kind of following through with them.
Okay, very good, very good. As we have this conversation about equity, and as Mrs. Tapman mentioned, this is certainly at the top of probably one of the top 2 or 3 things at the top, in addition to COVID and us surviving COVID going forward. Equity is at the very top of every student and staff member's list right now. How do you begin? How do you all have equity conversations with your friends, with your colleagues? How do you begin those conversations? I mean, it's tough. It's very difficult. And when I began to have these conversations with my colleagues and with folks here at KDE and other educators, I start off acknowledging it. It's a tough conversation. It's a conversation that we have not been accustomed to, because there's such a disconnect with some people in terms of defining what is equality versus equity or even inclusion. But as a student, how do you define equity? And especially looking at resuming school potentially in a couple of weeks, I was able to tune in on that conversation. And as the commissioner said, it's complicated. It's difficult. Does the health department, does the health community lead that conversation? Does KDE? Does your local school district? As you can see from the very bright minds on here, it's all over the place, and no one is necessarily wrong. No one is necessarily wrong. So, and that's an equity issue, because I know when we do start school back, whether it's next month, April, May, or next year, we're going to have to address learning gaps. We're going to have to address certain needs. And again, my heart is heavy, especially for our seniors. I mean, we went through it last March. How do we give you a prom, or how do we give you a graduation ceremony that acknowledges the 12, 13 years of work that you put in? That's an equity issue. How do we make up for the learning gaps and so forth? But as a young person, as a student in today's society, in this era of COVID, how do you begin conversations with your colleagues or even your parents about equity?
Okay, we have a couple of hands raised. Let's see. I'm not seeing. Why am I not able to see hands? Hold on a second.
I think Logan. I think I see
Logan and Miles. Yep, Logan. Do you still have yours raised, or did you? Is that still from previous?
That was from last time.
Okay, gotcha. Miles.
Like in terms of speaking, like with your question about like how do I bring about like the question of race or equity with my friends, like I live in Oldham County, and like my family is like an all Black African American family, and we're pretty like middle. I wouldn't say like we're pretty affluent in terms of being a middle class family. My dad's an engineer, and my mom's a banker, and so you don't really see a lot of African American families like that, and especially in Oldham County. And so I just try to show people and kind of talk about race, about like, I went to Goshen Elementary, which is not very diverse, and I live in Oldham County, which isn't too diverse. So I just try to show people and kind of tell them about my story and how I guess one of my goals is to try to get more families and more inclusion in Oldham County.
Okay. And Miles, that's I read somewhere that the best way to debunk bias thinking and thoughts is to prove folks otherwise, and I certainly agree with you on that. But that's also a heavy burden as well. and it could be tough because what we don't want folks turning to you and having you to be a spokesperson for all African American families in your community. As you said, your financial situation is probably different from a lot of African American families in your community. But I certainly agree with you. The best way to combat bias is to prove folks otherwise.
Very
Okay,
good
great.
point.
Yes, great strategy there, Miles. Anyone else?
Viviana?
Hi, I'm Viviana. So one way that I have kind of noticed, especially at my school, that, like you said before, these conversations can be very hard to have and they can be hard to bring up just because of a lot of different reasons. But I found that a good way to do it is like I started a club at my school that's kind of based around equity and like inclusion and kind of that whole general idea. And sort of like creating a safe space where people know that they can talk about it and, they won't be judged or, put down for any of their, opinions. And I think just like creating that space where people are confident in expressing what they think, I think that's a really good way to start these conversations because people aren't really afraid to express themselves. And so like during our meetings, I found that we have had a lot of really good, meaningful discussions about equity in our school.
Okay, very good. Creating that safe space to discuss issues about diversity, inclusion, and equity. Very good. I like that.
Jack put in the chat that he lives in a rural community with not very much diversity. Therefore, he doesn't have these equity conversations very much. And we do hear that a lot. And we have, even since we've been having these conversations with superintendents, I believe those are some of even the honest conversations that we're having with some of our superintendents, which are great conversations and great starting points to have. So I think I see Roheen.
Yeah, so I think, like creating safe spaces to talk about these issues. One thing that's happened at our school, like my English teacher, we take some time in class to discuss these things in small groups or with the whole class, and everyone is pretty like comfortable with each other, I guess. So they're not really afraid to say what they think about that, and that creates a lot of good opportunities to discuss these issues. So getting to do it in class in small groups with friends or whatever, if you're like teachers or administrators sort of organize those, I think that's a great way to get the conversation going.
Yeah. And I'll add this: if you live in a community that has very little diversity, that's probably the main community where we need to have these conversations, because I've said this and I've said it in a very professional and respectful way with my colleagues, because just because you don't have that level of diversity doesn't mean the conversation should not be had, because our kids, you will be leaving those communities one day and going into more diverse communities, either in Kentucky or across this country or across this world. And we owe it to you. We have an obligation to ensure that we've helped pack, along with your parents, we've helped pack your suitcase for life. We've given you the essentials in your suitcase that you need to survive no matter where you go, not only to survive and thrive. And so if you're living in those less diverse communities, and again, we've had these conversations, we'll continue to have these conversations with leaders in your community about the importance of having this, please raise those questions, raise them in a very professional and respectful way, and simply say that I love my community. I may not be here my whole life, but I want to be prepared when I, interact with someone whose background, whose ethnicity is quite different than mine.
Very good points. As we wrap up today, we have about 2 minutes left. As always, the 2 hours go by really quickly. I'd like to toss it back to Dr. Glass. Just letting you all know that we do have, I will have an exit slip for you all And I would like you to continue to think about this. I will put that point, those couple of those questions on there as optional. So if you do want to explore some of those questions that we're asking our superintendents, I encourage you to do so because Dr. Woods-Tucker, I know, would appreciate that feedback. And with that, I'll give it back to Dr. Glass to wrap things up.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Woods-Tucker. Thanks, Tony, for coordinating. And thank you, students, for being part of this. This was a really great conversation today, and I think it, we had the conversation that we needed to have. We always overplan these agendas and put too many things in them, but I think it's often best just to let the group settle on what we really want to talk about and what we need to talk about, and let that conversation come forward, which happened today. We're working on a recommendation for the governor now around what happens in January. I will certainly take your feedback into account as we work on that. Ultimately, it's the governor's final decision around that, but you've really helped me and helped us think that through today, so thank you. And also appreciate your engagement with Dr. Woods-Tucker on these important discussions around anti-racism and equity. We're working on this sort of scan of where things are in the state and understanding our current status, and then working toward a toolkit of some kind that districts and schools can implement to make improvements in equity and in anti-racism. So this is helpful in that journey for us as well. So I'll let you go. I don't think I'll see you again until the other side of the new year. So happy holidays to everyone. We're really grateful that we had the chance to spend time with you, and you give all of us hope that the future is going to be very bright. This is a really talented and exciting group to work with, and we are grateful that we have this time with you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Absolutely, yes.